And the first thing you have to do, you have to make pipeline generation easy. So how do you, as easy as it can be. So how do you make it easy, right? You provide them the tools immediately, right? That it's easy for them to get a message out to multiple customers about a use case, about a situation that's happening in the market, right? So, something that's easily consumable by them that doesn't take them 4 hours to figure out and write themselves.
Welcome to the Modern Selling Podcast, where we help the entire sales community to create more sales conversations with today's modern buyer. This includes anyone from entrepreneurs and business owners to sales reps and sales leaders. Each episode, you will hear from sales leaders, practitioners, and influencers to help you find, engage, connect, and nurture your relationships with your buyers. I'm Mario Martinez Jr., your host, and you're now listening to the Modern Selling Podcast. This episode is brought to you by Gong, the #1 revenue intelligence platform for sales teams. Gong helps you achieve revenue goals by capturing and understanding every customer interaction, then delivering insights at scale so you can win more deals and increase rep productivity. Get powerful visibility into your customer conversations with Gong. Head to www.gong.io to get started. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this episode of the Modern Selling Podcast. I'm Mario Martinez Jr., your host, and today I've got a very special guest. I say that almost on all my episodes, but this one, as you know, in 2021, we've really been focused in on bringing leading practitioners to the podcast, and I want to welcome Mr. Scott Walston. Scott, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, Mario. Great to be here.
So for all of you listening in, you're probably wondering, or you may know, who is Scott? Well, president of America Sales from Micro Focus, a
Correct.
Small little itty-bitty company, one might say. Scott, do me a favor. Tell us a little bit about your background and what
Sure.
you do over there at Micro Focus.
Sure. Yeah. So I am the president of North American Sales at Micro Focus. It's about a $1.1 billion business for myself. It's Micro Focus itself is about a $3 billion business. I have 600 plus people that actually roll up to me throughout North America to ensure, the success of our clients and the success of our people. For this, I was at BMC for almost a decade. I was running North American sales for them in the enterprise space, really kind of training a new team on new logo hunters, right? So we went out and every single day we were out trying to, show the value to customers on what we could do with the customers who were not currently BMC customers. And before that, there was, about 4 or 5 other just incredible organizations I got to work for. I got to work for Hewlett Packard. I got to do a startup company called Key Factor, which was an incredible experience. My initial training was at Xerox Corporation when we used to have spin selling. I used to go to Xerox Leesburg back in the day, which was just an incredible Xerox university that Trey does. So lots of selling in my background for the past, almost 3 decades.
Well, fantastic. Now, what's interesting about your background, Scott, is when you and I spoke in what I call the pregame show, it was interesting because you actually came on board in May of 2020, right in the middle of a pandemic. And if I'm not mistaken, you actually, as part of the executive hiring process, did you ever shake the hands of the leaders that you were working for?
No, Mario, I've never shaken the hands of the leaders that I work for or the people who work for me. So it's been, we're 8 months in now, and I've got to meet one person face to face. Everyone else, it's through Zoom calls, right? It's through Teams calls, and it's just through conversations. So it's been interesting to actually make a transition as a leader in a pandemic for sure.
Well, probably your first time ever experiencing something like that, where you didn't get to meet your direct reports, shake their hand, and vice versa, the executive lead team, that you didn't get to meet them other than a remote environment.
Right. Yeah. Very first time ever. Right. Because, jobs like this, usually you meet people multiple times, you sit down, you have some dinner, break some bread, right? Really get to understand the people. And we had to do that all remotely this time. And then, the leaders, who I'm fortunate enough to actually work with, who roll up to me, right? I mean, that really is the way we did it there. It was just Zoom calls, getting to know them, right? And in that situation, speed to trust, right? The idea that they can trust me as quick as possible was really what what I was shooting for. I really wanted to make sure that they understood who I was, what my values were, what the culture was I was trying to drive, and then just, be a man of your word and stick to what you say.
So I got to ask, totally digressing here, off
Sure.
topic here, but did you have any virtual Zoom dinners with your lead team at all yet?
So, not dinners. We've had virtual cocktail hours, though.
Okay.
So we have virtual cocktail hours. And I think at some point we're going to talk about pipeline generation. And so, I'm a big believer in pipeline generation days where we take time in the calendar every quarter to do it. And those always have some type of virtual cocktail hour with them as well. So not only do I get to meet the leaders, I get to meet, a lot of the team outside of in North America that actually roll up to me and just share a beer, share a glass of wine with them. So that's a lot of fun.
Well, then we'll take the virtual cocktail hour. That'll work just fine too.
Okay, good.
So I always ask all of my guests this question, and it's a way for us to get to know you a little bit. Do me a favor, Scott. Tell us something nobody knows about you. Even if they were looking at any or all of your social profiles.
Yeah, looking at all my social profiles, it's a really good question, Mario. The first thing that comes to mind actually is I'm kind of a fantasy football junkie. I grew up in Pittsburgh. I'm a huge Pittsburgh Steelers fan. And when I started working in software, the Veritas sales rep, if folks are out there who remember Veritas software, got me into a fantasy football league. And ever since then, I'm on 3 leagues now, right? I love it. It's a data-driven type of thing, right? There's a lot of luck, but there's a lot of data in there as well. And so, every Monday night, every Sunday, I'll be plopped in front of the TV. I got my laptop up looking at the scores as I'm actually watching the game. So I just really enjoy that kind of freedom or freeing experience that fantasy football gives me.
So what I need to know is your secret to the time, because I can't even figure out how to find time to, let alone do anything for myself, but finish up on emails. I'm already 1,300 emails behind at the beginning of the year.
Right. Oh yeah. Yeah. Prioritization, right? So you got to make sure you can take a little bit of time for yourself there, Mario. So if you got a passion and something you love, make sure you're carving the time out to do that, because you can watch football and reply to emails actually. So I'm pretty adept at that as well. So yeah.
I love it. Well, listen, we're going to get into a topic here that's near and dear to your heart. It's near and dear to my heart, in terms of something that's very important that leaders need to be thinking about. And it's all around sales pipeline, right? Mm-hmm. And this is a topic that, everybody knows that mm-hmm. it is a must have, must do, must focus on. And everybody knows that we've had the age-old problem of oftentimes, or majority of the times, our sales folks not hitting their actual goals. And it has a lot to do with looking back at the pipeline. And I know that you spent a lot of time really looking through and managing sales pipeline differently. So I wanted to bring you on to spend some time talking about that. Let's first establish, Scott, for those sales leaders that are listening in and sales reps that are listening in right now, why is a sales pipeline so important?
Yeah. So sales pipeline at the highest level, Mario, it's the headlights to the business. So when you look at a rolling 4-quarter pipeline, so it's just not, your current fiscal year, but truly a rolling 4-quarter. So if you're 1 quarter into your fiscal year, it's, the next 3 plus the first quarter of the next year. The rolling 4-quarter, it really shows you the headlights to your business, right? Because you should have some close metrics, some ratios on pipeline, 4x, 3x, whatever it is, that says, listen, if I'm at this pipeline, if I'm at $1 billion in pipeline, I should be able to close $250,000. That's at the highest level. Now, when you're thinking about it from a rep perspective, right? I was a rep, right? We were all sales reps. From a sales rep's perspective, right? The pipeline is what allows them to make life-changing money, right? It's what creates wealth for them. And so if they're sitting there and they have a $2 million quota or whatever the number would be, and they only have $4 million in pipe, there's not too many industries or not too many reps that actually have a 50% close ratio. So if I'm a rep and I'm passionate about it, right, and I want to make life-changing money, I wouldn't be happy with that type of ratio. And so coaching the reps on what good looks like, what the statistics of the industry they're in, right, actually say to be good pipeline is something we have to do as leaders, right? And we have to put those numbers in front of them on a regular cadence. We do it weekly at Microfocus, so they understand what their rolling 4-quarter pipeline looks. Because if you don't have the sheer pipeline volume that you need, you're never going to be able to hit your number. You're never going to be able to hit 200% of your number, which is really when you get into that life-changing type of money that I want all my reps to be able to make.
No doubt. And as you think about this sales pipeline, you talked about understanding your close ratios and what that number looks like. This question that I'll ask you, I think, is probably a relatively open-ended question. But if you think about the question, how much should you have in your sales pipeline? I think that question has various different answers. Give me your thought about that as you look at, and you're talking and you're coaching your reps. What does that multiplier look like? How much? How big? Should we be padding the numbers? Those types of things to be able to stay off the radar screen. Let's talk through first off how much, and then we're going to kind of get deep down into the management of this pipeline, if you would.
Sure. Yeah. So how much really is it? That's a data-driven exercise, right? So I have multiple product groups, multiple businesses, if you will, that roll up to me, and each one has a different data set that says, one of them actually needs 2.7, coverage from pipeline. So if it's a $1 million quota, they need 2.7 or $3.7 million in pipeline. If you do the math on that, right? Other product groups that roll up to me, they need 6x coverage, right? So they have $1 million, they need $6 million, right? So it really goes back to your operations team, your finance team to engage and inform the sales leaders on really what historically has been closed. Because once you understand those historical metrics, you can apply those with some rigor and some certainty. Now, you can't get stale on those, right? Because that will change over time. You always want to look back, not on a quarterly basis, but on a half basis, say, listen, what was my pipeline ratio? What did I close? Do we need to adjust that 2.7 to 2.9 or make small adjustments to it so we can honestly talk to our reps about why certain things need adjustment. Does that make sense, Mario?
Yeah, for sure. So question for you, when you're looking at this ratio to close, if you would, and you mentioned the operations team, the finance team should help provide some of this data.
Yeah.
Is that something that is like a front and center type of number that you deliver every year to the reps? Or is it something that's on a dashboard that they have that they're looking at in Salesforce as an example? Like, how do you operationalize that?
All that is a yes, right? That is a front and center number, right? So my strategic account managers versus my mid-market account managers know the difference in their ratios, right? So they know what their goal is. Not only do they know what their rolling 4-quarter goal is, they know what their pipeline creation goal is for the quarter itself. And then we actually pace it on a weekly basis. So they understand how they're pacing to that quarterly goal. Because if you're not hitting your quarterly goal for pipeline creation, you're going to have to make it up the next quarter, right? Because at some point your rolling 4-quarter will fall off and you won't be able to make life-changing money. And so that's how we continually reinforce to the individual contributors, listen, pipeline, right, is the headlights to your business. And so we'll give you the metrics to actually trace it and track it, right? So you understand where you're sitting at, not only in the next 90 days, but really over the next 365 days.
Gotcha. And thinking about this concept of pipeline as the headlights to your business, which I'm almost feeling like that's going to be the title of this podcast. Pipeline is the headlights to your business. I love that saying. Obviously, pipeline is the key factor for whether or not you're going to make that life-changing money. And hopefully many of us have experienced that are listening in. And if we haven't experienced it, well, you hopefully will experience it with getting there one day. But pipeline generation is one of the biggest challenges to the sales force today, right?
Correct.
No matter where you go, no matter what the organization is, whether it's consulting services, technology, SaaS, printers, whatever it might be, that is the Achilles heel for most organizations is the generation component. So thinking of that, talk about some of the strategies that you guys have enabled or that some best practices that you're bringing to the table here for pipeline generation.
Sure. Yeah. So there's a couple of things that you can do from a leadership that I think you can do from a leadership level to really help out the reps, right? And the first thing you have to do, you have to make pipeline generation easy. So how do you, as easy as it can be. So how do you make it easy, right? You provide them the tools immediately, right? That it's easy for them to get a message out to multiple customers about a use case, about a situation that's happening in the market, right? So, something that's easily consumable by them that doesn't take them 4 hours to figure out and write themselves. That concept, right? There's different names for it, but the concept would be more something around continuous pipeline, and continuous pipelines based upon thought leadership. You can think about a recent hack that just happened, right? That everyone's aware of. You can think about AWS's earnings announcements today. They were actually down a little bit. Any of those things can actually be thought leadership articles, right? You can sit there and put 2 or 3 threads together in an email threads, right? And send out to customers just to inform them a little bit about what happened, and then have a call to action at the end. Come to a blog post, come to a webinar, come to that. Now there's technologies out there like there's they're called customer engagement technologies. There's like tools called SalesLoft. That's like one of them, right? Which actually string those emails together for you, so it doesn't become a manual process for the rep. So if you give them the content and you give them the tool to disseminate the content, right, that makes it very, very easy for the rep to send out thought leadership pieces. So that's one concept that we use. The other concept, right, is around pipeline generation days, or the idea that we're providing time in the calendar, right, to actually go and attack, the pipeline itself. And so in doing that, we make that fun, right? So we have costume contests and we have awards outside of just compensation, things like that. There's just things that are a little bit of fun. And so the idea there is that if you're taking time out of a quarter, and just saying this is all we're doing for a 2 or 3 day period, right? And then you have the marketing team actually give the sales teams value-added content to deliver to customers, to be able to talk to them about some new changes in technology, new changes in our technology, right? Where the future's going, and be able to reach out and communicate to those customers. We see an uptick almost every single time, not in pipeline creation so much, but in activity. So the KPIs that create pipeline. So things like discovery meetings, demos, right? Just, follow-up meetings with customers, tracking those type of things. We always get a big uptick in those activities in that 2.5, 3 day period. So the idea of smarter pipeline, that we're continually giving thought leadership to our reps, that's easy to consume, disseminate to customers. And then the other one, the idea of pipeline days, we're clearing a calendar for an entire sales team. 600 people know these 3 days in this quarter are going to be, this is what we're going to do. So the technical people get behind you, the marketing people get behind you, the product group gets behind you, right? And we all focus on that for a 3 day period. It really allows them to give the necessary attention to their customers that they need, where they might be working on closing like 2 deals, which they should be doing, but you should be talking to your other customers and your other prospects at the same time. And sometimes we lose focus on that because it's really fun to talk about closing the deal. It's not really fun oftentimes to talk about building pipeline.
So I gathered a number of different things there. I wrote it down this way, and I'm going to summarize it, but make it easy to create the pipeline. You talked about 3 elements. 1, make sure you got the tools to be able to facilitate getting messaging and information out there. With that tool, you need to feed it with content and the actual messaging. So hopefully your sales enablement team, your marketing team is helping to construct, whether it be templates or whether it be the sales messaging based upon product line, problem, business pain, whatever it might be. And then you said making sure that you take the calendaring time in to actually do it and make it fun. And you talked about, setting time aside, and you talked about a quarterly basis that you've got, 3 day trek, if
pipeline generation days,
pipeline generation days, right? That are focused in on that. And then you're going to measure that from a KPI perspective. You'll match awards to that. And did I hear you say something about costumes?
Yeah. So we always try to make them fun, right? So we had back to school, right? So what was your favorite back to school outfit, right? So we had some of that. And this year was great because of the pandemic. So a lot of people came in gas masks and things like that, right? So it's kind of fun. Halloween's always fun, right? Because think about all the great costumes that come out from a Halloween perspective, right? And so actually we have a pipeline generations days coming up in February, and it's going to be Mardi Gras. So, anyone, you think about the Mardi Gras costumes that can actually come out. And so when you used to do these in person, right, we get teams together in different cities, right? It was a lot of fun. But even virtually with Zoom, seeing all these costumes and all these faces, painted or masked or whatever, it really gets pretty cool. And you get awesome, photo collages that you're able to look at again and again and again, reminding that, it's just not all work. Sometimes you got to have a little bit of fun in what we're actually doing.
So how do you facilitate that for, a 600 person sales organization? Are you doing like one big kickoff call, or is it regionalized, or is it, by director, by manager? Give me an idea of how you facilitate that.
Yeah, great question, right? So the way we're laid out, right? I'm the president, for the Americas, and then there's vice presidents that go underneath me. So each one, we we allow we have the 3-day period, right, when those things actually happen. So we provide the calendaring, right? Then the marketing teams and product groups are aligned to provide the content, right? The creative juices, if you will. And then it's up to the vice presidents to go ahead and actually align their teams, right, on the costumes. And so they get, a certain amount of budget where they're able to choose the awards they want to give out, right? Sometimes it's kayaks, like I said, sometimes it's, it's jackets, sometimes it's, Yeti coolers, right? The whole, whatever they want to do, right? So I don't micromanage it, right? I allow the time, I ensure they have the resources they need to be successful. And then I actually measure the outcome, right? Because what I'm looking for is the outcome of it. And I jump in and out. Like I said, there's cocktail hours on these things sometimes. So I'll jump in and out to multiple calls to say hi to people, see how their day was going, see if there's anything we can be doing better to actually support the field team.
Gotcha. And during this time, are you expecting leaders, managers, directors, VPs, even yourself? Are you reaching out, trying to schedule appointments, maybe using your referral network? And how do you measure against that?
So that's a great question. So, because I don't measure against that specific thing, but I do expect the leaders to reach out, and I expect myself to reach out. So we had one actually in October, the Halloween one, and I reached out to a lot of my old contacts, right? And just some of them are friends, and just, hey, what are you doing? How are you doing? And a lot of them, hey, you have some of my technology installed. This is what it is. Do you own it? Who owns it? Right. And just aligning, executive alignment to have conversations about, how satisfied they are and what value they're actually getting from it. So yeah, I do expect my leaders and myself to reach out to individuals that we know to understand how they're actually using the technology and if they're getting value from it. Yep.
Yeah. So funny you mentioned that. And I'm a big believer that sales leaders, whether you're a VP of sales, you're a director of sales, sales manager, you've got one word in your title that's pretty darn common for all sales leaders. Sales. Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
So we have to lead from the front. And when we got a pipeline generation problem, we got a pipeline problem. Look, we have a network too. We have customers too. We should be making those phone calls. We should be asking for the referrals. And some of the best referrals that we get, our sales team, we go through our target prospects and we look at who does Mario know that can get us to where we need to go. And unfortunately, I field a lot of those. And I say unfortunately, because it could be a lot, right? So you got to figure out the right type of accounts that you're going to engage your leader in. For me, it's all about the referral. So I say, bring it on. But for someone like yourself that's got a 600-person organization, you're clearly not going to be taking a referral request from 600 sales reps, right? There's got to be some sort of methodology to the madness. But with that in mind, I think leaders listening in, if we have a pipeline generation problem, not only do you have to bring the ideas to the table, but you better also be figuring out how you're going to generate pipeline as well. And it's not their problem, it's our problem.
Correct. 100%. It is our problem. And, we talked, how I came in the role in a pandemic, right? And what's one of the things I focus on, it's trust. There's no better way to build trust with an organization, with a sales team, than getting in the foxhole with them. Getting in the foxhole with them, making some calls, talking to some customers, right? That is a show of your commitment to them to be successful.
Yeah. Well, and to that end, back in end of last year, I think it was the November timeframe, we had a pipeline generation problem. And some of our folks were like, well, I'm having such a hard time, nobody's paying attention. I can't be done right now. And I was like, all right, next week, contest.
There we go.
Perfect. Me versus all of you.
I would lose that battle. So, but that would be a hell of a contest for sure. So,
well, and so we did it. I did it for a week. I won. Awesome. I won. And I was like, there's no way that you're going to tell me that it can't be done. They're like, well, that's not fair. You're the CEO of the company. You can. And I was like, round two. Let's go round two. And so I actually took second place, but nonetheless, round two, I'm still at it. Right. So that's one of the things as a salesperson. You think about, the keys to the kingdom, the keys to success, the keys to that life-changing paycheck, where you're getting a $500,000 check or whatever it might be, is pipeline. And I think that is where, a lot of sales leaders, we talk about this pipeline, have a pipeline problem. And I think, honestly, Scott, it's single-handedly one of the main reasons why CSOs and CROs sit in our position only for 18 months. That's the average lifespan is 18 months. in those positions because of this topic that we're talking about right now.
Yep. You got to focus on it, right? It's as important, if not more important than the forecast, right? Because if you're not focused on pipeline, you might hit a quarter, you might hit the next quarter, but sooner or later that's going to catch up to you.
Well, to be honest, you don't got a forecast unless you've got a pipeline.
That's correct. Yep.
And you're not closing and hitting quota unless you've got a pipeline. So all roads lead back to prospect.
Pipeline.
Pipeline generation. Yeah, fantastic.
Yep.
So let's talk a little bit about when opportunities should be entered into the pipeline. And I think this is a big challenge. Everybody's got a different philosophy. And there's things that, we know for leaders, for example, in my organization, they know that once something hits that 50 percentile, that it's in 50% or greater, it has my visibility and our customer success officer's visibility for various reasons, right? In terms of scaling up the organization and those types of things. But a lot of people have different viewpoints in terms of this quote pipeline. So what I want to have you do is give me take some time to talk about when should an opportunity be entered into the pipeline. But before you answer that question, I want you all to listen to this important message from our program sponsor. Opinions in sales are your worst enemy. Here's why. Your business has million-dollar questions that if you could answer with facts, you'd have an unfair advantage. Those questions are, what really separates your best reps from the rest? Why do end-of-quarter deals slip? What messaging is resonating with your ever-changing market? It turns out the truth is buried right underneath your nose. It's found in the customer conversations your team is having every day. Introducing Gong. Gain powerful visibility into your customer conversations. With Gong, you'll win more deals, skyrocket rep success, and gain critical market intelligence that will help you achieve revenue success and win the lion's shares of the wealth. Go to gong.io/demo to get started today. Okay, right before that break with our program sponsor, I asked you the question, when should an opportunity be entered into the pipeline? So tell me your thoughts on that, Scott.
Yeah, so in the software sales, there's a sales qualification process called MEDDIC, MEDDIC, right? A lot of people use it, right? And I'm a big believer in that. And so when you think about that qualification process, there's three areas that are required that you need before you put in an opportunity. The M in MEDDIC is metrics. So the idea that you have some metrics, right? For the customer, and that could be more uptime, right? That could be being able to get code out faster, right? Some hard metrics the customer is able to give to you, right? Percentages wise, or something like that. That's one of the areas. In indication, so the I in MEDDIC is an indication of pain with it. And I always add with the time to resolve, right? So the idea there is that the customer has some type of pain, whatever that pain might be, right? And they have to say, listen, I have to resolve this pain in this time frame. And a great analogy to that, Mario, is I have a knee that's bothered me for a while, right? And I've gone to the doctor a couple of times, and at some point I'll probably need to get an operation. So I have a little bit of pain. It kind of bothers me when I run, but I'm not going for an operation yet until it really, really bothers me. So if there's not a timeline to resolve the pain, it's still painful. You still have an indication pain. It just might be resolved 4 years from now, which is giving no value to you from a pipeline perspective. And the other thing is a potential champion, right? So the idea that we're talking to someone with enough influence inside of the organization who can actually understand how to, take a project and shepherd it through the organization itself. So metrics, indication of pain with a timeline to resolve, and a potential champion. Those, for me, are the three necessities you need before you actually enter an opportunity in the pipeline. And oftentimes that takes 3 or 4 discovery calls to get there. That's not one and done. I mean, that's usually multiple calls to understand if you have an opportunity or don't have an opportunity. The thing that frustrates me the most is when someone fills out an RFP and they put in an opportunity and they've never talked to the customer, right? That's not an opportunity. That's oftentimes a waste of time, right? Because if you didn't know what's coming out, right, what's the likelihood of you actually being able to win that?
Yeah. So interesting. Very familiar with MEDDIC and understand the metric. You got a champion, you got an indication of pain, makes sense. There are philosophies that are out there, of course, that the pipeline, especially in that early stage, let's just say that 10% probability phase, the qualify stage, that you should put those into the pipeline so that you can begin tracking to them all of your activities and your tasks and what you're doing, because you may sense that there's an opportunity there. It may not be tomorrow, could be next year, like you're still qualifying that. But you're suggesting that, hey, before putting that into the pipeline, even in the early phase, make sure that you've done your due diligence. Maybe that's 3, 4, 5 calls to go through and assess whether you've got metrics from the customer, whether you've got an indication of pain from the customer, hopefully associated with your particular solution that you solve.
Right, correct, yeah.
And that you've got a champion who might champion this particular project. And that's what qualifies it to enter in at the early stage of the pipeline.
Yeah. Now, so 100% correct. Now, like inside sales, right, or people who take inside leads, right, they have systems that are pre-discovery, right, if you will, or pre-pipeline.
Yeah.
And so what you're talking about, the idea that we're nurturing those customers and keeping them warm and communicating with them, is something you definitely have to do, because you don't want to lose touch, because that could become, not pre-discovery, but discovery, right? And discovery, in my language, needs those three things. It needs metrics, indication, pain, and potential champion, right? And so once that's when it becomes a real discovery, and that's when it has visibility to the pipeline, and that's when your metrics matter. When you have visibility in real pipeline, because that's where you get your close ratios, right? That's where you get your 3x, 4x, 5x, whatever your close ratio is for your industry. But if you're just putting that stuff in that's in really, really early stage, somebody gave you a business card at a trade show, right? You call them, they say, hey, I'm kind of interested, and all of a sudden, there's a $300,000 opportunity that pops in. Those will start skewing your metrics. So your close ratios or your pipeline conversion ratios will drive up to 7, 8, 9, 10x. And at that point, how meaningful is the pipeline you're looking at as a sales leader? Because you don't know what's real and what's not real.
Yeah, that's a very, very, very good point that I think a lot of folks are challenged by, which is why we see oftentimes when we get those ratios that come back, especially the larger you get, the bigger this problem is. When you get those ratios, you're sometimes being told you need a 10, 12x ratio because of all the stuff that you had inside there early on in the phase, right? Or you're tracking to things that you want to keep off the radar screen because you know that your leader is not going to look at something unless it's got at least X% probability inside the system, right? Or it's at a certain stage and above. And now all of a sudden, now your leader starts looking at that particular data. So I wish there was a universal language that every sales group and organization and leader could speak on sales pipeline. But you've got so many different methodologies and philosophies around how to manage this that it becomes an exasperation, if you would, when you go from company to company to company, and pipeline generation problems are just fundamentally the baseline. What we should probably do, Scott, is we should probably think of like the baseline and try to figure out how to make it standardized across the world. And whether it's Medic or something else, we got to figure out what that solution is.
Yeah. I mean, if there was a way to standardize that across software sales, IT hardware sales, backhoe sales, right? That would be fantastic. I have no clue, like if I worked for Caterpillar, how many backhoe sales revenue I would need to be able to close one backhoe. It could be 3 to 1, 10 to 1. I just wouldn't know. It'd be fascinating for me. I would be fascinated by knowing that. So it'd be really, really interesting. So, yep.
You guys are working a lot on the strategy of pipeline generation. One, because that's kind of your forte. That's what a lot of people know you as, is the guy who's really focused in on pipeline. And this is I would call it one of your signature trademarks as a sales leader. But to generate that, as we're talking about this concept of pipeline generation, you mentioned earlier around content and the need to have content that will drive conversations. It could be thought leadership-based content. It could be webinars, videos, those types of things that all steer us closer towards the continuing conversation, right? So talk a little bit about, from your perspective, especially in a virtual world where our field sellers are, for the most part, virtual right now, or remote sellers, and talk about the role of content in supporting the sales pipeline.
Yeah, if you don't have good content, right, you're just not gonna reach your customers. In my view, content needs to add value to the customer. It can't be hey, give me a call back because I have a cool widget, right? That's just not going to work. You actually have to be able to have a meaningful message, right? Saying, listen, I understand your business, right? This is what I've seen in the annual report. This is what I've seen from a competitor. This is what I've seen in a Wall Street Journal article. This is some of the value we provide. That's a great way to open from an individual contributor standpoint, right? So that's you creating your own content to actually be able to talk to a customer one-off, if you will. Now, from a marketing perspective, you have to have a very willing partner in marketing, and whether it's product marketing or field marketing, right, or web marketing, those all kind of have to integrate together because that's a little bit more around the masses. And when you think about that type of content, that's taking something that's more around a thought leadership perspective. So, whether it's an earnings report, right, whether it's something that's significant that's happening in a vertical, right, telco or whatever, right, and putting some messaging around that's going to resonate with a specific persona inside of an account, right? So if you're selling, help desk tools, right, being able to target a help desk manager, right, is something that you want to do, right? Versus taking that same message and sending it to an HR manager, it just wouldn't make sense. So having marketing be able to take the content message and align it to a persona, so the sales reps you can just go through LinkedIn, discover.org, whatever it is, and line up personas to the actual content itself, right? So you have the one-off type of stuff the rep has to do through research. You have the marketing partnership that actually has to happen. Then there's a whole social aspect to it too. The idea that we're getting more effective at using tools like LinkedIn, right, which you guys are experts in, to target the customers that we really need to talk to, who are going to find value in what we're delivering, right? Value in what we actually provide. And to do that, it's kind of like the first one, right? You have to understand the individual that you want to build a relationship, how to build that relationship via social, right? And provide them things that actually give them value. You can't pester them and be a nuisance. You really have to be able to target it on some of the messages that you provide them. So when they read it, it's like, damn, I learned something because this individual sent me something that was important to me in my business.
Yeah. Scott, you are the first person, the first customer to hear this information. And it's a plug-in for Vingresso from something that just happened to us. But I'll tell you where I'm going with this because there's a purpose for this. So on Friday of last week, I received an email. You're familiar with the Stevie Awards?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay. So we, Vingresso, just won the Gold Stevie Award for
awesome.
our PVC sales methodology, the PVC sales methodology. Now, that's very exciting. Everybody's listening to it here right now on the podcast, and we're super excited. And that's 3 years in a row. But the first one was around our 10 steps of how we implement a digital sales training program. Mm-hmm. The second year that we won it, which was in 2020, and that was specifically around our selling with LinkedIn sales training program. And now we won it for the sales methodology that we go through on learning and teaching sellers how to actually bring value to the sales discussion, whether it be on social or on email or even text or a phone call. So coming full circle of, this plug that I'm putting in for Vingresso is really all around the V for value, right? Yep. So P for personalization, the V for value, and the C to have the right call to action. And, sadly, there are a number of reps who more reps than not, that haven't figured out that the keys to enter into the kingdom, my space, where if you want me as a buyer or even you, is that we have to speak to the pain that our product or solution may solve, but through content that will provide solutions or problems to that specific pain. And not all buyers have your pain that you can solve at the same exact time. And that's where our job is to align timing with pain and the desire, back to your messaging, the inclination to change is what I heard you say earlier, right? And so if you think about this role that we have as a pipeline generator, I would argue, tell me if you agree with me or not, that our job in the modern selling age, remote selling, virtual selling, 2021, has gotten a lot more complex than it was when you and I were selling 20 plus years ago.
Yeah.
And that is because we're looking at, first off, how does Scott, if you were my buyer, how does Scott like to interact? Do you want to interact through email, social, text, video? I mean, what's your preferred format? And secondly, you've got a ton of stuff coming at you in all different directions that are, by the way, digital in
Mm-hmm.
nature. So we, as a seller, me, if I'm selling to you, I've got to figure out how I'm going to get into your office the right way. And more importantly, bring you value that instantly speaks to a problem that you am hoping that you have right now to create that opportunity potentially. And I think our jobs have gotten a lot more complex. What are your thoughts?
They have. They've gotten complex for multiple reasons. First off, I mean, the ubiquity of social and email, and you can get lost in the noise so easily. It's ridiculous. That's one of the reasons why, right? It's just very easy to delete, and go on to the next thing. So I think that, getting above that noise or through that noise continues to be more difficult. I also think, when you think about the buyers of whether it's, software or whatever it is, right? To align the solution to the pain, right, for the opportunity to change in that change window, and there is still somewhat of a science to that, because a lot of times that is more of a drip, what I would call as a drip campaign versus you're not going to know a lot of times, right? There's some account-based marketing tools out there that give us a little bit more of an indication, but you're never really going to know. Right. So the idea that you're persistent and persistently adding value to your messaging when you're reaching out to these individuals has to be critical to a rep, right? And so you got to think about how you're doing that, how you're getting your solution, your name, your company in front of the people who are making decisions, but not in a noisy way, in a way that constantly adds value, because you don't know when that opportunity for change is actually going to hit for that customer.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. No today doesn't mean no forever. And I kid you not, at least once a month, I have a senior executive that will reach out to me and say, hey, man, I know we've been connected and we've talked over the last few years. I've been watching what you guys are doing and I'm now ready for change, right? I'm now ready to do something. And that happens all the time, that, sometimes it takes years to be able to to take the pain that they may have or have had, and that now they have the desire to create change. So that's a really good point that you bring up. All right. Managing the sales pipeline. I'm positive that if I were to drill down into any one of your 600 sales reps that you've got in the organization, that Johnny does something a little differently than Susie, and Mary's a little bit different than Sally, and Sally a little bit different than Bobby, right? I'm positive that you've got all kinds of stuff going up, and then sales managers, directors, VP. I'm positive that we've got all kinds of stuff going on inside the pipeline. So how do we, as leaders, especially with the size of your organization, or maybe maybe I'm a sales leader and I've got 100 salespeople, maybe I've got 50, right? Whatever the size, how do I successfully manage this sales pipeline?
Yeah, it's really through data and inspection. Right, it's those two things. So the first thing is, from an inspection standpoint, making sure you inspect the ingest. We talked about that. That's really the metrics, indication, pain, and potential champion. So as long as you train your FLMs, the most important role in any sales organization is that first line manager, right? Because they have so much responsibility. And so one of the things you need to train them on is, listen, we don't put something in pipeline until it has these three things. So you actually understand the ingest, right? Is this a real opportunity or not a real opportunity? And then, pipeline gets stale. It just happens. And it's very difficult. I remember as a rep, it was really difficult for me to kill a pipeline, right? Well, it was a $500,000 opportunity. They said they're going to do it 12 months from now. It's very easy to go to Salesforce and just click on that and change that close date to 12 months from now, right? And say, all right, I'm going to call them back in 6 months. Well, you do that enough times, you're like, damn, that probably isn't a real opportunity anymore. And so it's our job we do it on the 6th week of the quarter. So halfway through the quarter, we actually go through and have the FLMs, have the CMTs talk to the FLM, have the VPs talk to the FLMs, that talk to the reps, to say, listen, let's go through and let's take a look at the pipeline and make sure it's not stale. What do we have that's actually stale in there, right? And so you see a dip, right, every 6th week, right, around 6 weeks, right? You see a little dip in the pipeline, 8 to 12%, because you're cleaning out, right? You're just kind of cleaning out some of the stuff that should have been cleaned out, which is okay. And it's the same conversation. What are the metrics, indication, and pain, and who's the potential champion on this opportunity? Hey, metrics are gone, pain's not there anymore. It's been open for 365 days, so they're able to do it still in a very, the talk track doesn't change, right? From the manager's perspective, it's still those same three three things that you're actually asking the rep to understand if it's real or if it's not real. So that's the practical application, if you will, that we train FLMs to do. But there's still data you have to look at, right? You have to look at, opportunities that have been open for 180 plus days that haven't been touched in 180 plus days, right? And you're always going to have some of those. So when you look at the data behind it, that's when your operations team hopefully is saying, listen, we need to double click on this $20 million worth of opportunity, whatever it would be, and make sure that these are actually real. And at that point, is it just a hygiene problem where people aren't updating what's happening on the opportunity, right? Or is it really something that's not real, and we should probably, get rid of it? Or to your point, maybe the rep wants to make it a tickler, right? Kind of like a pre-discovery thing. So take it down to $1, so it's not really skewing the metrics, if you will, for the overall organization. Because as you said, pipeline is important for forecast, right? And so if you have the wrong pipeline, your forecast could be off. So those type of important metrics we need to always make sure are in check, if you will.
And the magic words you said earlier, in my opinion, were: you need to train your FLMs, your frontline managers, right?
Most important job.
Yep. That it is. It's the most important job. We put a lot on them. We put a lot on them, and but they will earn it back when they get to the next levels. But they too can have a positive impact and a very successful track record as a frontline manager. And honestly, this is your department. It's your business. You've got to manage it that way. Also, too, I think if you're a sales rep, honestly, Scott, when I was in the field and I was managing my book of business, I looked at it as when I had, let's just say, a $50 million year. I used to have large. So when I got into the super large accounts, the $50 million year revenue runs that I was responsible for, I looked at that and said, man, if I had a $50 million a year business, like, I would be inspecting my business in a very different way than thinking it's somebody else's business. And that's, so again, just looking at, a track record. How do you have a track record that is at 100% or President's Club every single year? Like, what do those folks do to be able to get there? I truly believe it's exactly what you're talking about, is they look at that book of business or the business that they have to bring in, and they say, this is my business. And if you put that lens of that business owner hat on, you'll be looking at your pipeline, your metrics, your data in a very different way than it's somebody else's business.
I agree. We talk about owning your franchise, right? So it's your franchise. You need to own it, right? And then, we provide you resources and skills and trainings and marketing, right, to help you, right? But you still have to be able to take advantage of those and put those to use, because I don't know the customer like you do, right? I'm there to help if you need it, but you're the one who knows them well and needs to bring stuff back to me to make positive change for the customer, so they're seeing value in what we're doing. Because happy customers have a tendency to buy more, and so you want as many happy customers as you can possibly get.
Yeah. Well, listen, this has been a fabulous conversation all around the sales pipeline. We could probably spend another hour over drinks talking more about this pipeline issue. But I think there were some really awesome nuggets inside here. And one of the things I want people to walk away from this conversation, Scott, is centered around what you talked about earlier. And we kind of glossed over that. And that was the importance of having the marketing organization preparing the right content for your sellers that are mapped to the buyer persona and specifically to the pain, right? We're not talking about product-based marketing information. We're not talking about, the how-to, what-to guides. We're talking about content that leads your buyer to your solution, and it's by buyer persona, and that is key. So one of the things that I heard, and so with that in mind, my last question for you, because we're running out of time here, is whatever the size organization might be, small or large, if I don't have that type of content available, what would you suggest a sales leader to do?
Yeah, if you don't have that type of content available, and you don't have marketing, if you're a small organization to do it, then I would focus on the thought leadership stuff, right? Because the thought leadership stuff comes out in the Wall Street Journal, it comes out in Fortune magazine, it comes out on news releases, it comes out on things that you probably read every day as a business professional. And so you can take those and actually wrap content and ideas and creativity around those. And it doesn't mean you have to do something huge. You take it, you take the Wall Street Journal article, you send it to, send it to someone, because that's going to have value to that person. If they get a chance to read that article, it might remind them. And then, we do this as well. We use our technical pre-sales resources, SEs, to write blogs and do some other things. So if you have other resources like that, just to stand up some things that are relatively easy to do versus a large marketing machine, having some things to point customers back to, something else they can go and get value from that's really attached to your brand, are the two things. Thought leadership that gets your face in front of them, that you give them something. Then the second thing is other thought leadership that at least attaches your brand and your company to the persona or the problem you think they might be trying to solve.
That's a great answer. And I'll add to that. The other thing you could do is you walk. Well, I guess you can't walk anywhere to someone's office. Right. So how about this? You book a Zoom meeting with the VP of marketing, and you say, "Here's our problem. Yep. Create this."
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, if you have marketing, that's the first thing you should do. Saying this, hey, I need thought leadership. This is what it looks like. Can you help me out? And I'm lucky I have an incredible marketing organization at Micro Focus, and they're super supportive of what we're trying to do to actually touch customers and give them something of value.
Fantastic. Well, this has been an excellent conversation all around sales pipeline. And right now, 2021, brand new year, a lot of sales leaders like you and I are trying to figure out, like, how do I blow this year out of the water? 2020, mm-hmm. I mean, they always say hindsight's 2020. All right. Well, good news is we're in 2021. Yeah. And how do we do that now? So you've given some great tips. If someone wants to connect with you, what's the best way? Are you on Twitter, LinkedIn? I mean, what's the best way to connect?
Yeah, Twitter or LinkedIn. Probably LinkedIn more than Twitter, but either one is perfect. So, yep.
All right. So we'll make sure we put your link for LinkedIn in the show notes. But it's Scott with 2 T's, and it's Walston, Walston, with Micro Focus. If you're audibly listening to this, but we'll also put your LinkedIn profile URL into the show notes as well. And awesome. I got one last question for you, buddy, and that is all-time favorite movie. What is it?
Yeah, you're going to make me sound old, Mario, but I think my all-time favorite movie is actually Patton. So if that one, it goes way back, but George C. Scott was fantastic in that movie. Kind of captures some of the hardship of World War II, right, and what that incredible generation did to secure the freedom for all of us, so we could be on Zoom meetings right here in 2021. So.
Fantastic. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to Mr. Scott Walston, the president of America's Sales from Micro Focus. Don't turn that dial, because I've got this very important message right now. Sales managers, before you go, does it feel like everything is a priority and everyone is asking for your time and attention? Here's a free video training that will help you manage your time, double your income, and will skyrocket your team's success. It's called the Sales Management Matrix. You'll learn exactly how to spend your time for the highest revenue return possible. Go to gong.io/matrix to get the free 19-minute video training. Again, that's gong.io/matrix. Go there now, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for listening to the Modern Selling Podcast. Please do me a huge favor and give the Modern Selling Podcast a rating and review on iTunes. I would appreciate it. Also, if you want to easily find our show, just go to themodernsellingpodcast.com. Hey, since you'll be on our site, be sure to check out our Modern Marketing Engine podcast, hosted by my co-founder and CMO, Bernie Borges. Thanks for listening in, and until the next episode, good selling.